I'd like to start by saying
just
that
turn that
road
just
pricing
hit
and
the button.
toll roads
Up
are
on top, I
essentially a
think it is.
business. They're essentially a business operation. It's what it's doing is providing road space infrastructure for people with motor vehicles, and it's essentially a business. And what we should be driving at, if we're going to solve the problems of an obviously dysfunctional system, is to bring it into the normal commercial marketplace, so that we break down some of the state monopolies on road provision, and we get the system paying for itself and being managed in such a way that people pay for trips roughly in relation to what it costs to provide those trips. At the moment, the most common form of financing highways is the gas tax. And if you add up the federal and state gas taxes, they come to 2 to 3 cents per mile, per vehicle mile traveled. And that's regardless of where it is. I mean, you pay the same tax whether you're driving on a busy urban road that's cost a huge amount to build, or a rural road that's completely depreciated and is hardly stressed at all. The beauty of road pricing or tolling is that you can be much more realistic about it. When you look at the costs of expanding urban roads, it's very expensive, as people keep saying, and you can look at the life cycle costs and do the sums, and it comes to about 30 cents per vehicle mile on average in the big congested urban areas of the US. So there's no way we're going to build our way out of congestion with using the gas tax at 2 to 3 cents a mile. You'd have to increase tenfold the gas tax to be charging the kind of money which would support expansion of the urban network. So it's only going to be done with tolls, and in fact tolls are the main source of new highway capacity that's being added around the country at the moment. There's far more limited access highway capacity, new ones being built with tolls, toll financing, than with gas tax. Most of the gas tax money that comes from both the federal and state level is going into rebuilds and maintenance and operations and transit and all kinds of port projects and so forth. There's very little new money going for completely new freeways. So we're already moving in the direction of tolling. There's two big advantages in tolling. One is that the new roads can be self-financing. They can be financed either by offering a concession to private investors to come in and giving them the right to toll for 30, 40, 50, 100 years, whatever you decide to make the concession, in return for the right to take the tolls. They will build the road, and that's probably the world's most common form of building major new highways at the moment. It's not very common here in the US yet, but if you look at China, India, Australia, South Africa, most Asian countries, South America, the investor toll concession is the most common form of getting major new highways built in the world today. That's developed over the last 20 years or so. The other big advantage, apart from financing, is that it gives you a very effective tool for managing the highways so that you don't get a breakdown in flow. If you can just see it intuitively that often a highway is flowing along, it's pretty thick, you can't quite travel at the speed you'd like, but you're bowling along at 60 miles an hour or so. And all of a sudden the flow breaks down, and then you get backups and you get these kind of concertina effects. That tends to happen, if you look at the data, somewhere between 2,200 and 2,700 car equivalent vehicles per lane per hour. There is a very measurable capacity beyond which you beyond which, if you load the road, you get people hitting their brakes and they slow down. The average speed will drop to probably, you know, with stop and go, and slow down to somewhere between 15 and 25 miles an hour on average speed. And at that level, you only get a throughput of around 1,200, 1,400 vehicles. So all of a sudden, just when you need to be sustaining that throughput capacity, because of the breakdown in flow, you get the flow, the actual throughput is dropped by 2/3 to perhaps by 2/3 and perhaps even half of what it was before. And that's the reason why once you get a breakdown in flow, it takes such a long time to recover, because only after that traffic is cleared, that slow-moving traffic is cleared again, is it possible to get the flow back up again. And we have the experience now. We know we can do it. It's being done every morning on lanes with variable toll rates, 91 express lanes, where they vary them according to schedules, different toll rate each hour. And also dynamically on I-15, they've been doing it for several years now. They measure what they call the vehicle occupancy, which is a term for a highway occupancy, lane occupancy, that's the term. But they're measuring the level of congestion in the lanes, and they have some simple computer algorithms, and they know roughly the elasticity of demand, the response of motorists, given the choice of whether to use that lane or use the unmanaged lanes. They raise the toll, and they can maintain free flow, and they do it every day, and they keep the lanes pretty well filled, and they get a bigger throughput on those lanes in congested conditions. People flying along at 60 miles an hour, they get a bigger throughput. They look rather empty when you see photographs of them, but when they measure the throughput, because the traffic's traveling at 3 times the speed, the actual throughput is about 50% greater. It continues at that level of over 2,000 an hour compared to 1,200 an hour in those broken down flow conditions. So there's absolutely no question that we can have free flow, we can have peak hour traffic flowing without congestion if we use proper market mechanisms to price that traffic right. Randall O'Toole said he thought that I should spend a little time going around the country and talking about different things that are happening in tolling. I mean, overall, what's happening in tolling is that it's an $8 billion a year industry in the US. It covers 5,000 miles, and most of the big tunnels and bridges are tolled. So the busiest bridge in the world, George Washington Bridge, is a toll bridge, and most of the busy crossings are tolled. Some of them are doing interesting pricing things. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which manages the busiest tunnels and bridges in the world, the Lincoln-Holland Tunnel and the George Washington Bridge, have introduced differential prices between peak and non-peak, and they find they've transferred traffic, as you would expect, to the period before the peak, and they still have congestion because it's not a very large differential and it's not dynamic, but it's a definite improvement on what they had before. And if they had more discretion about how they actually set the prices, they would do much better again. And you have a lot of the old toll agencies are now they're moving in a rather tentative way towards variable pricing and getting market benefits that you'd expect from that, as well as making more money out of it, because they're providing a better service. The other big thing that's been happening in tolling is the move to electronic tolling, use of transponders on the windshield, which allow an account to be debited by radio frequency waves rather than people having to throw cash into. Cash is on the way out. Electronic tolling now consists of about 60% of the tolls that are done. It's rising very rapidly. Well, it's rising steadily. There's still a few places that don't have it, and establishing an account is something which regular users will do, but which occasional users don't see the point of it. So you need to have some supplementary automatic system which is license plate reading. And there are now toll roads in many places with no cash collection at all. And that's great because people hate queuing up and they hate having to fumble with money when they're manoeuvring into queues and they see that queue going through a bit faster, and you know you do get small accidents, mostly small accidents at toll plazas. And so toll roads had a bad name because of the awkwardness of paying the toll more than the toll itself, according to most of the surveys, in a traditional cash-paying toll plaza. But we now have the technology to do tolling at full highway speed on open road with multiple lanes. We don't have it implemented yet in all that many places, but it's coming along rapidly. Our two most heavily travelled toll roads in the country and among the most heavily travelled in the world, with multiple barrier plazas down the main line, the Garden State Parkway and the Tri-State Parkway in Illinois, in the Chicago area. Those two will both have full open road tolling, the whole length of them, within the next 18 months. They'll have that completed. And, you know, in some places they have 4 lanes and just the gantry over the top. That's all you know about there being a tolling point there. And there are very successful toll roads in Australia, in Melbourne, and in Toronto, and now in Santiago, Chile, just starting up, and one in Israel too, where they use a combination of the transponders and the license plate readers through cameras there. How much more time have I got?
About 3.5.
Okay. Among the new highways being built at the moment as toll roads are quite a number in Texas. President George Bush Turnpike is a big east-west highway across the north of Dallas, which is doing much better than was expected. It isn't even finished yet, but it's doing about 350,000 transactions a day. We have a similar highway plan here where I live. I'm here at the moment.
Where do you live?
In Maryland.
Oh.
In Maryland, called the Intercounty Connector. It also happens to be an east-west route that, like the President George Bush Turnpike in Dallas, heads to an airport. It heads towards Baltimore Washington International Airport. And you have a very ambitious set of toll roads being built in the Austin area in central Texas, 130, and you have, there's quite a frenzy of toll roads in Texas, a lot of which I think is getting on to, I like the idea of a toll road being basically self-financing with tolls, but unfortunately, in my opinion, the Texas Department of Transportation sees tolls as just another contribution to some big slush fund, and they are now got into the business of mixing tax money and toll money. They've generated an enormous backlash which has managed to unite a kind of, if you like, I don't want to be too rude here, but a sort of populist, right-wing, almost redneck element with environmentalist element there. And there's an enormous political furore in Texas there. I think they've overdone toll proposals. They've just got, I can't keep up with them, but there's something like 35 major toll proposals at the moment. Many of them which are probably good proposals, but they're being advanced in my opinion, in a way which is not in a poor institutional framework. They're not trying to justify each toll road as such. They're saying, oh, we've got another opportunity to put tolls in here and use that for that, you know. And so you've got a sense of, out there in Texas, as I read the political situation of every group thinks we was robbed for someone else's road, you know, with tolling. And so That's a pity because they started off quite well, and they do definitely need a big increase in capacity just because of the increase in population. But the other interesting thing that's happened was in January, the city of Chicago got $1.83 billion, $1,830 million wired into their bank account for a franchise from a joint venture, 55% Centra of Spain, which is one of the world's biggest toll road operators, and Macquarie, a Sydney, Australia-based group, for a 99-year lease on the Chicago Skyway. And that has generated enormous interest. Now you have the New Jersey government, which is flat broke with its transportation fund. They've been so profligate in borrowing that all their gas tanks are going, and license fees and everything is going to debt service. Well, it will. I think they say it's not quite there yet, but there's almost nothing after debt service left over, and they had a commission of what they call a Blue Ribbon Commission, which recommended a 15-cent increase in the gas tax and said that was needed in order to restore it. Didn't even look at tolling, which is very surprising given that New Jersey's got some of the world's biggest toll roads, but somehow these people thought along the conventional lines. The previous governor just dismissed it out of hand, and now they're looking at privatizing the New Jersey Turnpike. They could probably get $20 billion, that's my estimate for that, if they chose to do that. And there's, in New York, the Governor Pataki's budget has provision in there for state transportation agencies, which includes the New York State Thruway, the biggest one that has potential for this, to do deals with investor groups. And in California, the governor is supporting private concessioning there. In Delaware, they're seriously looking at doing privatization of their toll roads, and they could also do it in Indiana and Ohio, in my view. I have to tell Sam something about Ohio, and that is that there's been a massive expenditure and expansion of capacity in Ohio on the Ohio Turnpike. They've got a third lane program there, which has added enormously to east-west capacity, and they have a great asset there, which they could very well privatize. It mainly serves interstate traffic going between the East Coast and Chicago, and it's a perfect facility. It's a straight business facility. It doesn't really cater to many local commuters at all, so there's not much of a local constituency in Ohio for it, and the same is true of the Indiana Toll Road. So there's great opportunities, I think, for privatization. The first thing you saw when the Chicago Skyway was privatized was they drove down the cost of toll collection by 50% immediately. Under the old regime, toll collector jobs paid $20 to $25 an hour, and they never ever had to advertise one, of course. It was all someone's pals, their buddies, who heard on the grapevine that there was someone retiring, and they'd immediately get the job. And the investor consortium that's taken it over has got plenty of people, they told me, at $10 or $11 an hour. So they immediately cut the cost. They got electronic tolling, which has been talked about by the city for the past 6 or 7 years. The investors signed a deal with the Illinois Tollway to treat it as just a toll plaza at the Illinois Tollway, and they got electronic tolling up and running in 3 weeks after 7 years of nothing happening under the city. I guess the city, had some sort of understanding with the unions that there wouldn't be any job losses, and I think the next thing they can do is to have full highway speed tolling down the middle. That enhances the value of the facility to motorists because they save quite a few minutes. The tolling they've got installed, the electronic tolling at the moment, is just off to the sides, and it's still single lane. have to slow down to 5 miles an hour. There's a gate comes down, so that's handy. You don't have to
Fine.
fiddle with coins as much, but the ultimate thing is being able to drive straight through it without even slowing down the middle, and I'm pretty sure that I'll do that quite soon. So maybe I've exhausted my time.
Fine.
Thank you.
Ron?